Greetings class and welcome back to SCG 410 Module 6. This is Professor Ty Kateman broadcasting to you from the comfort of my home office, nearly live on Monday, October 12th. Today we are going to be discussing the concept of validity and comparing in your discussion external versus internal validity and what methods we can use to control for the threats to validity. Now, what exactly is validity? I define it as, can you trust the results of a particular study? The technical definition means, do the results of a study accurately reflect the truth, as you see here in the PowerPoint? But I think it's more nuanced in that we're actually asking about trust and the idea that the study itself has a certain amount of validity, that you can trust it to reflect not necessarily the truth, but the reality. It's nuanced, as I said. I don't think the book goes into this kind of nuanced discussion when we're looking at it starting on page 293, talking about internal validity and validity of research designs. But I would like to elaborate first with this concept of external validity. And this is where we ask this question, do the results of a study reflect what would happen in the real world? So let me give you an example. If we're studying, for instance, kids on a playground trying to answer the question, why do boys pull girls' hair? What we would want to do then is conduct a naturalistic observation where the children don't know that they're being observed, meaning me as primary investigator would stand way back away from the view of the children and observe what's going on and taking notes. And I would look for clues as to how the process of pulling hair begins and ends. Now, to control this experiment, I would make sure that the playground supervisor, whoever that might be standing in a corner or might be off looking at swings or another part of the playground, so that the subjects don't know that they're being observed. And when I see a child, a boy, pull a girl's hair, and I attribute that to a reason why, such as the boy attempting to get the girl's attention, then I can say that this has a high degree of external validity because the participants or the subjects don't know they're being observed, so they are going to behave as natural as possible. And that reflects the truth of what is going on in the playground. And therefore we could say that my observations would reflect the reality, at least through my interpretation, of the situation that happens. Now, internal validity is asking if we know what caused that behavior. And we can't say for sure that we know what caused the boy to pull the girl's hair, so we can say that this observation doesn't have a high degree of internal validity. So then what we need to do is we need to find out the causation, and we can do this through several manners, several research designs, and the first would be this idea of experimental research designs. And in the book, you notice they quote Campbell and Stanley on page 292, and they define two general categories of research designs. And that is where they give four types of validity: internal validity, external validity, construct validity, and statistical conclusion validity. So what do each of these mean? Validity refers to inferences about whether variable A has an impact or on variable B, meaning the outcome of the causal relationship. This is what we would look for in an experiment, where we would try to isolate why, or the causal relationship of why the boy pulled the girl's hair, which is the outcome. So that is why we are setting up a experiment, is to determine if there was a change in the dependent variable, either because our experiment measured what it was supposed to, or whether there was some spurious factor at work, meaning the factors were not accurate. And so this is why we look at threats to internal validity, specifically history, maturation, testing, instrumentation, and statistical regression. What we're attempting to determine is if there is also some amount of selection bias, meaning is there a threat, or there are important differences between the experimental and the control groups before the experiment begins. Selection bias is most likely to occur when the researcher cannot assign subjects randomly, but must use intact groups that have already been established, and that creates a quasi-experiment. So the intact group is a pre-existing group, such as the class of students who came out to the playground, or a group set up independently for the planned experiment, meaning selecting a group from different classes in the same grade and put them on the playground to play together. So another threat here is experimental mortality or attrition, and the last threat that we have to worry about, or one of the last threats, is selection or maturation interaction. Please note that. Experimenter effect and subject effects, meaning the participants' attitudes in response to the research situation itself is called the subject effects, and that can be a threat to internal validity, meaning the participants may try to impress the experimenter or respond they think they are supposed to respond by not pulling a girl's hair, knowing that they're being observed. So the tendency for subjects to change their behavior just because of the attention gained from participating in an experiment has been referred to as the Hawthorne effect. This is on page 303. And I think it's interesting to note that this kind of effect where the subjects are being observed really highlights what it means for external validity and naturalistic observations. So I think this gives us a very good view into the 10 most important threats. There is an 11th, which is diffusion, and that would not necessarily apply to the kind of experiment I've been explaining here, where kids from one class would inform the group coming out, the experimental group coming out to the playground of what's going on. So these are some things for you to think about, and I hope that this will give you the opportunity to read about dealing with threats to internal validity and discussing those, which that information begins on page 306. All right, class, I look forward to seeing you in the discussion and participating when I can. Thanks, and have a great week.